Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fight Forever podcast, a new podcast about all things professional wrestling. We'll primarily be focusing on AEW, a bit about New Japan Pro Wrestling, and we'll talk a bit about WWE, Impact, and Ring of Honor as well. We post these episodes several times a week, so let me give you the lowdown. My name is Michael Gaffney, or just Gaff. I'm the host, so I have a lot of thoughts about wrestling and whether your level is intermediate, a newbie, or you consider yourself an uneducated mark. This podcast is for you. This podcast is recorded in one take, or as close to one take as you can get, minus some tiny edits, to preserve the authenticity of what I'm saying, and so it feels like a conversation. So, if you're a wrestling newbie, you'll learn, and if not, then you'll want to contribute, so head over to twitter.com/fightforeverpod and tweet us, and we'll respond to your tweets on the show. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to it. So Money in the Bank is today. WWE's Money in the Bank, and my notes initially said tomorrow, but it's actually today. This was not part of the plan for today. We were going to discuss Rampage and a few other things, but there's a WWE pay-per-view tonight, which I didn't know was coming up so soon. I thought that it would have been next week or the week after, but no, it's tonight. So we're going to I didn't even think that we were going to be discussing WWE today, but let's give SmackDown a recap because it was hilarious. So SmackDown was last night, and before SmackDown there was one spot remaining in the men's Money in the Bank ladder match because Kevin Owens and Ezekiel, Elrod, Elias or whatever couldn't have a match on Monday because Kevin Owens wasn't there. And it's on SmackDown last night, and Michael Cole said that Kevin Owens was injured. So WWE advertised before SmackDown that there's going to be a Money in the Bank cavalcade tonight. A fucking cavalcade? What? So SmackDown starts with the usual Money in the Bank thing that they do every year now, where there's dialogue between all the performers, and they're all standing on the ladders in the ring. And Rollins says that they should all agree that they'll cash in at SummerSlam. It's interesting that he said this. They gotta sell those tickets, I guess. But it was just weird that they said, hey, next month we gotta cash this in. Strange. So all of the guys start talking about how they've all beaten Lesnar or Reigns before, except for Omos. Omos can't say that, he's useless. But anyways, Happy Corbin comes out and Madcap Moss comes out, demanding that the last spot in the match be theirs. Adam Pearce comes out and says that he can feel the aggression in the ring, and to clear the ring, tells the ref to clear the ring because there is a battle royal. Not once did they say what this match was for. Do you get into the match if you win this match? Is this for an extra spot in the Money in the Bank? But there were already people in the Money in the Bank ladder match in this Battle Royal. What is this for? But do you know what they kept saying? They kept saying that it's a good old-fashioned Battle Royal. That must have been the only way that they could make it very clear that you get nothing for winning this match. And that is just a random Battle Royal thrown together. So the final two in the match are Sheamus and Drew. Happy Corbin, who was eliminated, runs back in and throws both men out, and then stares at Pat McAfee. Okay, okay, sure. Why not have him just win the match then? I don't know. So it's interesting that they've done this. I might have made a mistake. Maybe Corbin wasn't eliminated now that I'm thinking about it. I watched it. Anyways, there's a chance Corbin wasn't actually eliminated. Now that I'm thinking about it. Anyways, it's interesting that they've done this when there was a Royal Rampage on AEW's Rampage show. So they decided to do this random battle royal the same day that AEW decides to do a Royal Rumble type thing, which is interesting. And also, I'm actually kind of annoyed that I messed up with the Corbin thing. I think he might have won the match. There's a chance he didn't, but I think he might have won the match now that I'm thinking about it. But it would help if I had a co-host. So Max Dupree introduces his new clients, which is Mace and Mansoor, with the weirdest spelling I've ever seen for any superstar wrestler ever. So, how do I describe this? It's like if somebody held down a key on the keyboard of their phone and chose a random variation of that letter. That's what they did for Mace and Mansoor. It wasn't capitalized. It looked like Elon Musk had something to do with it. It was very weird. So the main event is a fatal 4-way qualification match for the Money in the Bank ladder match. Today. Goddamn, today. Madcap Moss wins the match, so he's in tonight's ladder match. And this is the go-home show. And I went out of the show more confused than I was going into it. So Money in the Bank is tonight. I don't know how. And the Money in the Bank card is as follows. So you have Theory versus Lashley for the US title. You have the Usos versus the Street Profits for the Undisputed Tag titles. Apologies, by the way. During the Blood and Guts review, I said Angelo Dawkins versus Angelo Parker when I was discussing the Blood and Guts match. Sorry. There is Bianca Belair versus Carmella for the Raw Women's title, and there's Ronda Rousey versus Natalya for the SmackDown Women's title. And then we have our two Money in the Bank ladder matches, and the first one is the Women's Money in the Bank, which consists of Becky Lynch, Asuka, Alexa Bliss, Liv Morgan, Raquel Rodriguez, Lacey Evans, and Shotzi. That's that match. And then you have the Men's Money in the Bank ladder match, which is Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins, Sami Zayn, Riddle, Omos, Sheamus, and Madcap Moss. So look, the show is going to be okay. Unless the card ends up being amazing, we won't be recapping this on Monday much, I'd imagine. So let's move on to AEW Rampage, which is what today's show is actually supposed to be about. So Rampage was last night, and headlining it was the Royal Rampage, which is a Royal Rumble with 2 rings. Interestingly, WWE did a Battle Royal, as we just talked about, on the night of this Royal Rampage. I don't know why they did that if they don't consider AEW a competitor. It was a strange angle. So the show starts with the Royal Rampage. Apologies. So the show starts with the Royal Rampage, and the winner is Brody King. So he eliminated Darby Allin. So Brody came into the match late, and Darby was in there for the majority of the match. The finish was sick. So the finish was like this. The finish consisted of both men on the apron. Brody King has a sleeper hold on Darby. He holds Darby over the edge of the... so he lifts him off the apron and lifts him towards the crowd. Brody King has that sleeper on, and he holds Darby over the edge. Darby is out. Looks like he's out cold. And it looks like he's been hanged. It is a sick finish. Brody lets him go, and Darby crashes hard to the outside padding. It was a sick finish. A sick finish. So he essentially had a sleeper hold and swung him in front of the crowd and just let him go. And it was deadly. So weirdly in this match, this was a strange part of this match, Orange Cassidy came out very last to a huge pop and got eliminated in the weirdest, most anticlimactic way that didn't look on purpose and was way too quick. And it was because they were running out of time, I think. Because once Orange Cassidy got eliminated, there was 6 to 8 eliminations right after. So they sped this up big time. But it was weird. that they brought him out very last and he got eliminated so quick. And he had a match earlier that night because Rampage is recorded on the same day that Dynamite is live. So that night he had a match against Ethan Page. So it makes sense bringing him out last, but they eliminated him very quickly and he had no spot. It was weird. He just got destroyed basically by what's his face? Takeshita? Is that his name? Takeshita? That person. So Wednesday is Brody versus Moxley. It's an interesting match for Dynamite. So that's going to be the opener or the main event. The House of Black is getting a lot of interesting matches recently, and they need to win one of them sooner rather than later. The Young Bucks versus Hiroki Goto and Yoshihashi for the AEW Tag Team titles. It was a fun match, especially for a 10-minute match. This was awesome. It was a good match. The fans were not into this at all at the start, and they got it pulled into it because it was just so good. The main event was Toni Storm versus Nyla Rose. The arena empties during this match. There were a lot of people leaving this. I understand why. I'll explain. So at that stage, the fans have already sat through Dark Elevation, Dynamite and Blood and Guts, and have now sat through the Royal Rampage, and have sat through the rest of the Dynamite and Rampage shows. So they've sat through a lot of wrestling. Before Rampage even starts, they've sat there for nearly 4 hours before Rampage even starts. So it was a big yikes. Apparently the break between Dynamite and Rampage this week was way longer than usual because they had to clean up after the Blood and Guts match, which was thumbtacks, dirty canvases, glass, blood, everything. So people were very, very fed up and wanted to go home. And I saw a couple of comments of people saying, look, by the time that the Toni Storm match was even starting, it was coming up to midnight. We wanted to go home. It's a Wednesday night, fair enough. So Toni Storm wins the match, and Toni Storm gets attacked by Marina Shafir and Nyla Rose, and Thunder Rosa makes the save. The show then ends by Excalibur proclaiming, "We could have a thunderstorm on our hands," which okay, it's a cool name. If they're a tag team, actually a tag team, and they're called Thunderstorm or an alliance, it's pretty cool. It's a cool name. So that was Rampage. We will discuss the Dynamite show on Monday and talk about a few other things. But before we end today's show, I made a mistake. I made 2 mistakes. So last week, I already talked about this, but I talked about Angelo Parker and Angelo Dawkins in the completely wrong companies. In the Blood and Guts match, I said Angelo Dawkins. Angelo Dawkins is in the Street Profits. Right. He's on the pay-per-view tonight. So the person I meant to say was Angelo Parker. I got confused because as I was speaking and talking about it, the first name that came to mind was Dawkins, and I ran with it. And I got slated for this on the TikTok clip I posted, because even when I edited it, I did not realize that I was talking about the wrong person. So I made a mistake. And I apologize. Angelo Parker is in the Jericho Appreciation Society, not Angelo Dawkins. The other mistake I made, and this one was another genuine, honest mistake, right? So somebody also asked, why didn't I discuss Santana in Blood and Guts? Now, if you are unaware, Santana got injured in that match. He literally was in the match for 1 minute and was in the ring up against the cage for the entirety of the rest of the match. Now, luckily for him, the match actually, when he entered, it started to move to the top of the cage slowly. They were building up to it, and there was a lot of stuff happening, so he wasn't even noticed really. So he enters. Eddie Kingston enters after him. So he's only really in the ring visible for 5 minutes before things start to move to the top of the cage. But the mistake that I made was I had this in my notes, and for whatever reason I read over it and I somehow didn't discuss this. So he lifts up Daniel Garcia for Uranagi, which is essentially like a rock bottom kind of thing. If you don't know what a Uranagi is, it's like a rock bottom. And in the video and in the live feed, you see his leg. It doesn't look smooth like what he did, but it doesn't necessarily look wrong. It doesn't look like he did anything wrong. I feel like this is exactly how you deliver a Uranagi. What it turns out is he's after tearing multiple ligaments in his leg and in his knee. He's after doing severe damage to himself, and it might not just be his knee. There is a fear it might be his ACL and knee ligaments that he's after tearing. That is rough. We haven't heard from him directly. We haven't heard from AEW, so hopefully it's not as bad as we fear when it comes to this injury. And I saw a lot of chatter of people defending AEW here in terms of for keeping him in the match and stuff. He probably should have been taken out of the match, but if you're advertising blood and guts, he kind of needs to stay in there. In fairness to everybody in the match, he was untouched for the rest of the match as far as I could tell. So they did keep him safe to a large extent. When it comes to AEW's injuries, this is another injury, except this one is the first one that was a clear freak accident and didn't come from an aggressive style of wrestling or anything like that. This was just a regular move. Like, this isn't a concussion. This isn't from being in a very aggressive match where something bad happens. It's not a tragedy in that way. It's obviously terrible to happen, but at least this wasn't. How do I describe this in the least controversial way possible? At least this didn't happen from a very important spot that would have gotten way more attention, because people would have lost their minds at both Santana and at AEW for not protecting him enough. And at least it happened in this context if it's going to happen. Unfortunately, he is going to be out of action for a very, very long time. When it comes to an ACL tear like that, we probably will not see him for 6 to 9 months. It takes a long time for that to repair itself. As soon as we find out something, we will discuss this on the podcast. I'm just glad that it wasn't so bad that he needed to be taken out of the match or anything like that. It could have been an awful lot worse. It could have been like Adam Cole last Sunday. With Adam Cole, he obviously suffered a concussion, and Jay White ended the match there and then. At least this wasn't like a head injury or something way more severe than what it is. And that's not me putting down the injury. The injury is a terrible injury. But I'm just glad that he's not going to get abused by fans, and he'll actually have the time to recover, and that it isn't a brain or head injury. They're the only positives that you can really pull out of this. So on Monday's show, we'll talk about the Dynamite preview, and we'll go into depth talking about AEW's injury crisis, and we'll also discuss the power ranking controversy. So as always, if you have any feedback or questions, tweet us on twitter.com@FightForeverPod. We'll be back Monday. So, have a nice weekend. I will talk to you guys later, and take care.